All right, guys, welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. I'm excited to welcome Casey Ruff to the show. So, Casey is a veteran personal trainer, nutrition coach, and the founder of Boundless Body LLC. He hosts Boundless Body Radio, a podcast where he dives deep into low carb, keto, carnivore nutrition, movement, and holistic lifestyle changes. Over his 16 plus years in the fitness space, he's helped thousands transform their health and performance. Today, we'll unpack what's working, what's trending, how to build a sustainable, high performing life, and all the fun stuff that comes along with that. So, Casey, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Dude, Max, thank you so very much for the introduction. It's an honor to be here. It was so fun to interview you a few weeks ago for Boundless Body Radio, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm excited to get into a bunch of different things here with you. And, before we kind of get into all the fun stuff, as I'd like to say, could you maybe give the listeners just a real brief background on yourself and maybe what even drove you towards this lifestyle of health, nutrition, exercise, all that?
Yeah, sure. So I got interested in health and nutrition, as a I don't know teenager, I guess. I kind of grew up the chubby kid, but my dad is still a sportscaster in the Salt Lake area here, and so I got exposed to a lot of sports like the Utah Jazz, the Salt Lake Golden Eagles hockey team, and all that stuff. And I really liked athletics. Again, as kind of the chubby kid, I got interested in health and fitness, and before long was checking books about resistance training and taping up like routines on my unfinished basement wall to try to learn how to do strength training stuff. I worked at a gym as a teenager, but in college I was studying to be an architect. And while I was studying to be an architect, I joined a big corporate gym that had just opened up because I wanted to do some training for cycling in the off season. And as I was there training, I would watch the personal trainers, and what they were doing looked like fun. And they were also using heart rate monitors and doing metabolic testing, like VO2 testing, that I thought looked really interesting. And I had lots of experience with heart rate monitors and heart rate training. So I went into the manager's office and asked him what I needed to do to be a trainer. He gave me the certification. I went out and studied for a few months, got certified. I thought it might be a stopgap of something I could do while I was studying architecture to, just to have a decent job and make a paycheck at a pretty young age. And that was in March of 2007 that I was hired. So it's actually been 18 and a half years that I've been certified as a personal trainer. Added different certifications along the way. I ended up running not only our kind of heart rate monitor department of the personal training kind of program that we had, but also running the metabolic testing program that we had. And I was overseeing that program eventually in the West region of our club, which included 17 clubs. So not only performing these tests on different people to find out how they were, burning their calories, utilizing oxygen, whether they were burning more fat or more carbohydrates, the number of calories they were burning at baseline at rest, but also teaching trainers how to do those types of tests as well in their individual clubs. And so yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. The pandemic happened in 2020. Our gym shut down. My wife was working there as a Pilates instructor and ran the Pilates program as well. And so we just had to pivot and decide what we were going to do. We started our own company, which was Boundless Body LLC. And that's kind of where we are today.
That's so cool. And in terms of like the diet stuff, because I definitely want to get into like how you eat, how you train your day to day. I'd love to get into some of that. But and I know we've actually interviewed a ton of the same people, but I was curious like what drove you towards low carb, keto, carnivore? What was like the main driver towards that avenue?
Great question. Yeah. So as a cyclist, I even remember I had this presentation. I wish I could find it today, but it was done like 20 years ago where a nutritionist came in and explained to us as cyclists, a cycling team, how we should manage our nutrition, how many, calories of carbohydrates we needed to eat during a day, how, we needed to top off those carbohydrates every like 15, 20 minutes on the bike, different carbohydrates had different release speeds inside the body. And so you'd use maltodextrin for certain things, you'd use more complex carbohydrates for certain things. And I was always interested in that as a component of performance. I wanted to eat well, and I knew that helped to drive performance. And so, like I said, when I got brought on as a personal trainer, I was running our metabolic testing program eventually, which basically, um, if you can measure respiration, the air that you breathe in and the air that you breathe out, there is a certain amount of Well, first of all, the total amount of air that you breathe out will tell you how many calories somebody is burning. So if you're
Mm,
sprinting down the street, you're going to be breathing very, very heavily because you're using a lot of energy to sprint down the street. If I'm sitting at home, watching Netflix or whatever, I'm not breathing very much. I'm not using a lot of energy to be able to do that. And there's a big delta between those things. But also, if you can measure the difference between the oxygen that you're breathing in and the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out, you can determine the substrate utilization, meaning not only just how many calories are you burning, but are you burning more fat calories or are you burning more carbohydrate calories? And I'll never forget, it was 2012 that we did a call with a guy. He was coaching triathletes. He was in Colorado. He didn't work for our company, but he used the similar kind of equipment that we were using. And he was saying that not only could he change his triathletes' performance by giving them different heart rate zones and making sure they were training in proper zones for proper adaptations, he discovered that he could change the triathletes' caloric burn by changing their diets. And he was explaining that he had world class triathletes that were eating butter and bacon and avocados, and they were only requiring 50, 60 calories an hour to compete in triathlon at the highest levels, where here I am, I can't even get through like an hour long ride without importing hundreds of calories of carbohydrates every single hour. And I knew that. Like, we'd go on team rides with my cycling team. We'd ride for 3 hours. Every time at the middle point at an hour and a half, we would stop at a gas station. Everybody would go buy a bunch of sugary crap in the gas station, let alone everything that you brought with you in your jersey pockets. And if you didn't do that, you would run out of energy. You would bonk. And this guy is saying, like, it's not about the carbohydrates, it's about teaching your body to burn fat, because you store tens of thousands of calories of fat that can be used for energy, but you only store, 1,500 to 2,000 calories of carbohydrate energy. So it was a complete paradigm shift. And the coach was like, if you shift your diet, you increase the fat burn, you decrease the carbohydrate burn, and now there's no risk of bonking, even if you're not consuming very many calories while you're going. And again, this is all just like, what
yeah.
the hell is this guy talking about? This makes no sense. And so, sure enough, I started to implement it in what I was doing with myself. I started going longer and longer bike rides without needing as much stuff. Um, I started to apply it to the people that I was doing the metabolic testing programs at. And sure enough, like, people would do their initial test. We'd give them the advice of, training these heart rate zones, lower heart rate zones are what most people were doing, and shift the diet towards fat and try to reduce the carbohydrates. And people were getting wonderful adaptations and wonderful results when they did that. And so it was really like going through that process of seeing what not caloric, carbohydrate restriction could do. And if you replace the carbohydrate calories with fat calories, how that improves your endurance. That was kind of the first thing that I really saw that took me here. And of course, there were other things down the road that eventually you learn about how to burn fat, lose fat, work with like fitness, like weight loss contests. And then if you do that long enough, sure, you're gonna come up against the word keto. And that became my obsession as soon as I heard about all of that.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because so what pops up in my mind was one of the interviews I did with Alex McDonald, the Australian guy that ran 5 marathons in 5 days, completely fasted, and he was a fat adapted athlete. I don't know if you've interviewed him, but super cool dude. But yeah, that basically brings that scenario up into my mind, because people were always saying, especially for like longer endurance events, you need carbs, you need carbs, you need carbs, and it's like, no, you actually don't need carbs, and you actually don't need to eat. And what he was doing was he's very much like a numbers guy. Like, he was lean, but not incredibly lean. Like, he had calculated out, like, he had enough body fat or calories within his fat on his body for him to essentially run like 22 or 23 marathons, I would want to say. But he was like, okay, I'm just going to do 5 marathons in 5 days. And so he was already fat adapted, but he went out and did it, and he crushed it. And so I think it's so cool. A, the human body is awesome, but B, it's just so cool to see that you are able to do a lot of these, and not just endurance events, but other athletic endeavors as well, not being so reliant on carbohydrates, and actually use fat as a fuel source and have it potentially be a lot more effective and efficient.
Totally, dude. I love that. And here's an easy way that you can do the calculation. So
Hmm.
we'll use round numbers so that people can understand this. But let's say you have a person that weighs 200 pounds and they're 15% body fat. So this would be a fairly bigger dude, but also 15% body fat is, normal body fat, quite lean by today's standards. If you do the math on that, that would be the 15% on 200 would be 30 pounds of fat.
Hmm.
We know that 1 pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So now we multiply 3,500 by 30, we're getting up to close to 100,000. That's the number of calories of fat that that person would have on their body. And again, that's arguing that that person is fairly lean, pretty fit, 200 pounds. Think about somebody who's like morbidly obese at 400 pounds at a much higher body fat percentage. That number could be 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 calories of energy. And I do mean calories of energy. It's an energy source that could be used if that person had access to it. Yet their lifestyle essentially like locks away that as a potential fuel source when it could be used as long as we created those right circumstances to burn it and use it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So it sounds like to me, early on, just like most people, you thought carbs were a necessity, and then over time, you were starting to be becoming more and more aware of like, okay, like these lower carbohydrate ketogenic diets can actually be really, really beneficial. And so, in terms over your coaching career, going up to where you're at now, like what metrics or even lab values, if you track that stuff as well, like what do you prioritize now to know if someone's like really improving and moving in the right direction?
I love the question. I absolutely love that question. I will say through the course of my career, I've used lots of different metrics, blood, body fat percentage, blood pressure, all the data that we would collect by doing these metabolic assessments. Um, collecting data, we would get all the food that people would be eating and tell them what they should be eating and break down macros and all these different things. There's a lot of different metrics and things that people can use. I can't remember who said this. I want to say this is something like a Sean Baker saying. And in fact, now that I'm thinking about this, this may have been from the episode of Joe Rogan that I turned off halfway through when I was hearing this guy for the first time back in like 2017 saying all he was doing was eating ribeyes and he's like breaking deadlifting records. And he was asked something along the same question. Now that I'm thinking about it, I remember. And Sean Baker said, I really am having less and less value in different markers and things we can measure because these things are shifting around a lot,
Yeah.
and the value ranges are only really based on general population, which aren't that healthy anyway. And so we kind of don't really know. And so what I remember him saying at the time that I turned off the episode was like, I think the best indicator of your health is how do you feel today? If you feel really good today, that's probably a really good sign that you're going to continue feeling good tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So sure, like if you got a basic lipid panel, I want to know what your HDL and triglycerides are. I've got a body fat scale I use with people, and I want to know what somebody's body fat mass is and what their skeletal muscle mass is. If they're going the right direction, we're helping them with those things. So I do find value in all of that, and I will say that like the more information we get, the better. It's just nice to look at that, but also knowing that like I could shift my LDL or what they call like bad cholesterol by 100 points predictably in like 3 days. We have to just say like take it for face value, use it for what you need to, but at the end of the day, like I don't know, it's tough to put a lot of value into that kind
Oh,
of stuff.
dude, I was just gonna literally say the exact same example. So I get my blood tested often, and really a blood test is like a snapshot in time, right? And like, yes, they're important to know like what you're deficient in, but still, it's a snapshot in time. Like the hours or day in which you get your blood test, it certainly matters. Like to your point, I have gotten blood tests. I could shift my cholesterol drastically by eating like 10 eggs the night before I go in and do a fasted blood panel the next morning. So take a lot of those things with a grain of salt. But I guess the point here is like, how do you feel? How are you sleeping? Are you improving in the gym? Like all of those basic, foundational, fundamental self-awareness metrics are really, really important. And then, of course, yes, get the blood markers to understand like, cholesterol, triglycerides, hormones, and all those types of things and make the adjustments. But also know that again, that's a snapshot in time and that's not indicative of like how you are doing on the full spectrum of like health and wellness.
Yeah, well said. No, I love that and I agree with that a lot. The way you explain the blood metrics too is perfect. And I would say like there's some value if you create the same situation, there's value in like a history. Having something done annually gives you like, oh, okay, this is better or worse. I know I
Sure.
did it the same protocol. Yeah, that's great. but yeah, at the same time, you are realizing that you're looking at a snapshot, almost like taking a picture of the freeway, how much traffic is on the freeway. Well, is it 2 a.m.? Is it
Exactly.
5 p.m.? Is it Monday? Is it Saturday? Like there's a lot of differences there.
No,
So
that
yeah.
that's a great visualization. So in terms of coaching with clients then, let's say you're bringing on a new client, like, with regards to now your background on keto, carnivore, all these different low carb variations, which I'm of course like my handle's a low carb consultant, so I am also a big fan of all these different low carb variations and I use them all. How do you decide like which approach would be the best for that specific individual? I know it's obviously going to be on a case by case basis, but how do you typically go about that?
Yeah, case by case, and what's best for them is what they decide is best for them for sure. But I understand the context of the question, and I think, well, people seek us out first, because they've heard our podcast. They know we talk about this stuff. Our website is what it is and talks about, ketogenic nutrition and carnivore nutrition. Most people have heard of it, but maybe don't understand it that much.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a bit of selection bias where we get people who seek us out because we talk about that kind of thing. But also, oftentimes we don't, and we have to work with somebody who maybe had success in the past, like one time by doing caloric restriction, and maybe they were doing it by consuming lots of salads and broccoli, and they think that's the best way because yeah, they lost weight, but they don't make the connection that they probably weren't feeling that good. They're probably reducing their metabolic rate and feeling lethargic and having cravings and feeling really cold and all the things that come along with that. So honestly, like the big thing that I would say we start with somebody is like it's just such a low hanging fruit. Like most people are simply not eating enough protein. Most people
Mm,
just don't get enough protein.
totally.
And I'll take something from your episode with Fred Hahn that I really like that he said, and I believe you agreed with me. Like, if you're going to come and pay me a bunch of money for me to do training, and then you're not going to go out and eat enough protein, like, what a waste of money. Like, right off the bat, that's like one thing that you could do that's really not that difficult. And so I'll give an example for today. I was over at a client's house. I started with her maybe 2 months ago, told her what I do, sent her some meal plans. She's got a family. She's not following the meal plans very much. But yesterday she told me she made enchiladas. The enchiladas had, flour tortillas. And we just talked about that and said, like, well, you told me that you added extra chicken. Was that the perfect like low carb keto meal? Like probably not, but it's something your family ate, and you purposely added double the chicken to that recipe. That's a step, man.
Yeah.
Like that's a great step that I'll take any day of the week. Most people think they're getting protein and they think they should be getting like 150 grams, or I think they should be getting 150 grams. They're getting like 40,
Yeah,
and like
they're
20 of it is
grossly
like
undercalculating.
totally. And like you're adding up plant proteins that are incomplete and like all these things, like you're not even in the ballpark. So that is a great place to start. And if I can get some buy in there, it makes it more easy for me to take another step somewhere else. Can we get to low carb? Can we get to what I would consider a ketogenic diet? Is that even necessary or desirable for somebody? Or does somebody want to try a carnivore journey? Like those are all on the table, but I think it's all about like taking the smallest first step you can to get a win, usually around consume more protein and kind of go from there.
Yeah, and I had a question piggybacking off of that one, and the protein topic might be the answer to this, but I was curious, like, when you're consulting with someone, like, what's usually the biggest mistake you see people making when they're adopting a diet that you are recommending to them? Is it under eating protein, or is there another factor that they might be overlooking as well?
That's a great question. I, I, I think functionally the under eating protein is probably the biggest one because, in my opinion, it tends to fix all the things that people goof up anyway. So, what do people goof up? People are snacking. People are eating, portion controlled meals. Utah's becoming famous for this. Dirty sodas. So, if you don't know, yeah, I know it's
Yeah.
weird, but we are becoming famous for this. So very much a Mormon culture here, and a big part of Mormon culture is they don't drink, they don't smoke, so they have to find like other devices. And so soda is a really, really big thing here.
Yeah.
And there's soda shops pretty much on every corner that will take a giant soda and then pump in additional like flavors. So you could get like cherry Coke, and it's just like adding sugar to more sugar and like serve it with a sugar cookie. Like those are a huge thing around here. And if you look at Google, it shows when they're the most popular, and they normally peak right around like 3 p.m. and normally right around like 7 or 8 p.m. So if you think like most people are probably having lunch at noon and probably eating dinner around 5 or 6, why are they so hungry? Presumably like 2 or 3 hours after eating that. And, you know, if we could fix the snacking, that would get their insulin a lot lower. We could get them in a fat burning state for a lot longer. So I always go to the meal previous and say, okay, what did you have for breakfast?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like, yeah, I tried to eat healthy. So I did half a sandwich and I did a spinach salad and there was 4 ounces of chicken in there. And it's like, dude, that's a recipe to cause those cravings a few hours later because there's no substance in that meal. There's not nearly enough protein. When you eat enough protein, you're done,
Yeah.
dude.
You're
Like you're
full.
so satiated. Yeah, you can't keep going. And I make this mistake every time I go into a Brazilian steakhouse, and I think I'm going to tear this place apart. As a 6-year carnivore, like I'm just going to eat picanha for hours and hours and hours. Dude, 45 minutes. I can't even look at the food that was so delicious like 10 minutes ago. It's like, it's like you have an aversion to it and you can't eat for another 24 hours. And that's what I think people are missing when they're eating the quote unquote healthy choices and not prioritizing that protein. And then they're snacking and then they're trying to get rid of the snacking. Well, the problem is you're going to be hungry for snacks anyway because you never ate the protein and fat you needed to make you not want snacks to begin with. And that could be as easy as just saying like, when was the last time you went to brunch and you had an omelet and you just went this like weird amount of time without even thinking about food? And people can say like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was weird. So that's what I would focus on.
Well, and it's also kind of like a double whammy too, right? Because if you're talking about like your specific area where these dirty sodas are popular, right? So people aren't eating enough protein, so they're not even really getting that satiated. But then if you're eating the sugar, right? So if you're not getting so satiated by the meals that you're eating, but you're eating a bunch of sugar after lunch or whatever the case is, basically you're spiking your blood sugar, you crash, and then you're hungry again. So it's like, but it's like a kind of like a circle of death where you're not eating enough protein, you're not feeling full, but you're eating so much sugar that you're constantly hungry all the time, and that's just sending you on a on a spiral to weight gain, 100%.
Great point. Yeah, I love that. I had somebody reach out to me today and said, you know, I'm trying to lose weight. I can't really lose weight. I know what I should eat, and I wake up in the morning and I have 3 eggs. And I'm like, okay, that's a really good choice, but I know this guy. He's a bigger dude. He's got lots of muscle mass. Why are you eating 3 eggs? Like, can you put down like 5 or 6? Like, I'm guessing 3 eggs is probably not enough to make this person like hit that spot where they're like not craving food. And if I were to food intake him and see what he's doing,
Mhm.
I would assume I would find like snacks or hunger after that meal because a lot of people think like 3 eggs or 2 burger patties is like this huge amount of food. And it's like, no, no, no. If you remove some of the crap that you shouldn't be eating, you might find that like you should be eating like 6 or 8 eggs or maybe like 3 or 4 burger patties. It needs to be enough to make you feel very full and very satiated so that you just aren't thinking about food so much. You're not hungry and you're avoiding all the pitfalls that you just mentioned, the bouncing blood sugar up and down, the constant stimulation of insulin that's locking away fat so it can't be burned and you're storing more and more and more of it and become insulin resistant eventually. So yeah, you explained that really well.
Great answer. And I had curious because you just mentioned you were a 6-year carnivore. What is, how has your diet evolved over the years? Like, did you typically start off low carb, keto, and then go to carnivore? Or what specifically drove you? Was it like some of the metabolic testing you were doing that you were starting to realize, wow, this is actually a really great diet? Or were you running into anything in particular where it's like, I'm not feeling my best, I'm going to try to eat this way? Like, what kind of started to drive you towards some of these low carb variations for yourself?
Yeah. So think about like a kind of typical progression like you just mentioned, but really stretch it out over a long amount of time to show how slow of a learner I am, basically. So learning in 2012 that fat could help you burn fat better and could improve your endurance. I was introduced to the work of Nina Teicholz and the Big Fat Surprise around 2014, 2015, and thinking like, wow, saturated fat maybe isn't that bad for you. I did get certified as a nutritionist in 2017, and that was back to the mixed diet. You should have the whole grains, you should have fruits and vegetables, colors in your plate, and that kind of re-indoctrinated me the other way. And I remember like adding more of that stuff
That
in and
little
making shower.
paleo-ish? Is that kind of like paleo-ish?
Yeah, paleo-ish. It's like a higher carb paleo, like making sure you get constant carbohydrates with every
Got
meal.
it.
That's okay, but it's like you still want to limit it to like a tablespoon a meal, sort of a thing. And that's how I coach my people. Um, And then, yeah, it was really these weight loss contests that we were kind of forced to do at the company that we were at. Our company made a tremendous amount of money when they would do these temporary weight loss contests for like 2 months, and they would run them 4 times a year. And as trainers, we had sales quotas that we had to go out and recruit a bunch of people to do these contests. And the compliance was terrible. We would hand people a packet of recipes and food lists that had all these obscure ingredients like arrowroot powder and rutabagas and all kinds of weird stuff. And
Yeah.
nobody could do it. Like it's too much to do, and people would throw away food at the end of the week, and nobody saw good results. And doing all these hard workouts, and they'd quit. And as trainers, we hated it because we'd have to go out and find new people to do it every time, and it never worked. In 2018, we had a cohort of people that included a guy who worked for the company. He didn't even want to do the contest. I listened to some of the things he was eating and just recognized, like, dude, this guy's like waking up at like midnight to eat cereal. Try to get more protein and fat, and let's start with that. And he came back a few days later and said, I've lost like 3 pounds. What is this keto stuff? And I'm like, well, I've seen that on magazine covers, but I don't really know what it is. And that's when I jumped down the rabbit hole and started learning about that. I tried to reduce my carbohydrates much further and got into kind of a ketogenic state through 2018. We started applying these kinds of lessons to the people that would do these weight loss contests. We'd give them completely different meal plans. Say, like, throw the ones that they gave you in the garbage. Here's some low carbohydrate ones. Make these with your family. Do the ones that look good. Eat as much as you like. You don't even have to restrict this. And we had amazing compliance, amazing results with fat loss and weight loss up until the pandemic. But yeah, that was my progression of, like, your standard American, you add a little bit of fat in, probably evolve to like paleo. You try keto, and keto is like a nice step. Like,
Hmm.
you lose a little bit of weight. Your brain seems to function a little bit better. That was nice and unexpected. But when I started learning more about the carnivore diet, learning what it was, what it wasn't, and to be fair, I have a pretty liberal definition of a carnivore diet. I use the definition of a hyper carnivore in nature is at least 75% of their calories from animal products. I do that so that in the carnivore community, we don't need to squabble whether somebody had a slice of avocado with a burger patty. We talked about this on our podcast. It's ridiculous. Like,
I
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I hate how people get religious about it, where it's like, oh, you're not carnivore if you use pepper on your steak or something like that. I'm just like,
It's just,
you
yeah.
know,
Exactly. Yeah. So all of that to say, like, I am much stricter than 75% with my diet today. But again, when I was learning about what carnivore was, I wanted to try it for myself eventually. So that was April of 2019. That was my first 30-day trial.
yeah,
And it was really striking to, I had the normal things like my digestion sucked for a little while, and that got better. I lost a little bit of fat going from keto to carnivore. I was able to maintain muscle really well. Eventually, my performance in the sports that I really like was better. But it really was like 2 weeks later when something really stressful happened at work, and I didn't like lose it. I wasn't stressed. I didn't spin out in anxiety. I just responded like really calmly and cool and collected, and like realizing, like, wait a second, like, this would
yeah,
have caused me some amount of consternation before. I would have for sure been anxious about the future. Like, what just happened? And that's that carnivore calm that people talk about. And I do think that, even just temporarily, if somebody tries the step from keto to carnivore and stick with it, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever you land on, to try it and see what happens, you can find a whole cohort of people that will tell you the strangest things that happen in their health. Like, my itchy elbow doesn't itch anymore,
yeah.
and my IBS completely resolved itself and went away, and I never have gas, and I don't have athlete's foot, and I never get a sunburn, and all these things that people list. And then I really do believe that as long as somebody is not going full send in the other direction back to a standard American diet, you can start to open things up again. You
Totally.
can, like, yeah, include some things. Find out what plant foods are just fine and benign for you. What plant foods maybe do cause you problems. Your former guest, Sally K. Norton, somebody that I've talked to as well, like, she'll tell you, like, I've eaten with her. She is not a carnivore. She eats plants, even though she works in the world of oxalates. And so I think if you take those steps to be a little bit more strict. You can open up a little bit more. But where I am currently, like I'm fairly carnivore. I'll have coffee in the morning. I will put, salt and fat in the coffee. That's really great for my mental energy. I'll normally fast until either I'll have my first meal at, 7 if I'm fasting all day, and I'll just have about a pound and a half of red meat. Or sometimes if I have the time and I'm hungry, I might add like, 6 to 10 eggs in the middle part of the day. But I use low carbohydrate, sauces.
Like Primal
I
Kitchen or something, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, stuff like that, just to make the food a little bit more palatable. I use spices. Although I have found that the longer I go, the less of the spices I need, and the more that like salt just tastes really good. Um, but yeah, it's just really simple to stay in that realm, and I don't get worked up if a half an onion makes its way into my ground beef for a week, or if I have a packet of guacamole. I still consider that very carnivorous.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And going back to what we were saying around some how people can kind of sometimes get religious about this stuff. It's like at the end of the day, it's like first off, you got to find what works the best for you. But it's like, yeah, like it does sometimes bother me that people will say like, oh, well, you're not carnivore if you're doing this, that, and the other. And like, well, it doesn't really matter as long as what you're doing is working for you. You're feeling your best. You're sleeping great. You're performing in the gym. Your life is great. You know what I mean? Yeah, like I'm picking up what you're putting down there. And I was curious, in terms of maybe switching over to the exercise stuff, how are you like working out? And we can definitely get into how you consult with clients on training if you do so. But how do you typically go about like your movement and exercise? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, I love the question. We mentioned Fred Hahn already.
Yeah.
He was not the first person that I'd learned some of this stuff through, but I remember, and I don't even know how I learned it, but I remember getting introduced to the work of Dr. Doug McGuff
Okay.
initially, and his book Body by Science. That was probably 10 years into my career, and I had been trained as a personal trainer to do functional training. So, I'm a hockey player. My moves in the gym would look a lot like moves that I would do on the ice rink. And maybe I might load up a bar that has some resistance on it, and it looks like I'm slashing my buddy in the thigh, or taking a slap shot, or skating back and forth. I'm jumping, back and forth, or whatever. If you're a basketball player, maybe you're throwing a heavy ball that looks like a chest press. You're jumping off of boxes and
Very cool.
changing direction and all that stuff. And that's what you're trained in, as a personal trainer. And the whole like slow strength, high intensity training movement is more focused on like don't do any of that. That's not your sport. That doesn't help you with your specific skill. Use the gym to make yourself be very strong, and work on training the muscles, getting the muscles to a deep level of fatigue or failure or muscle success, as Fred Hahn talks about, and then take the rest of the time and go practice your skill and sport in the context that it's normally done. Like you don't get better, uh, you know, as tennis player by practicing basketball, or you don't get better at ice hockey by playing chess. Like there's other things that don't really jive together. To get good at a skill, you need to repeat that skill a lot. And so, I kind of tend to get really locked on to certain things. Like when I get locked on to a diet, I often forget everything that you and I just said, that like you don't have to get so worked up. Just because carnivore were great for you doesn't mean everybody's going to be able, really willing and ready to do it themselves. But I have drifted in the direction of like that kind of slow strength style of training, which is basically just pushing a heavy weight, regardless of what kind of exercise equipment you have available, to a level of deep fatigue, and then move on and do another one. I recently, I think it was really talking to you and how you're able to incorporate multiple modalities, and how you and I talked offline that like, yeah, we agree with Fred Hahn and everything he does with slow strength, but you can still swing kettlebells.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with that? You can do TRX straps if you want. What's wrong with that? Like, there's other things that you can do. It's just kind of understanding like, the principles of something. So I like to keep the high intensity training stuff as like the core, and then kind of individualize. So what that looks like for me personally is I will try to every day get somewhere over 10,000 steps a day. If I'm usually outside, I'm trying to do my work while I'm walking. I'm following up with people, and do podcasting stuff on my phone. I still play ice hockey 1 day a week. I love doing that. It's one of my favorite things. So that's an hour and a half of high intensity skating really hard with my buddies. I like to bike and paddleboard and do other activities that make me happy. But I see the gym as the place of like, okay, this is what's going to make you strong. Let's use that as a tool, minimize it, and then go out and go have some fun. And so I'll even break it down. Like it's weird, but I can't tell you the last time I went into a gym and just did like a 30 or 40-minute workout at one time. Like what I've been doing a lot more lately, I did this earlier this week. I showed up at the place so I was going to train somebody. He was about 5 minutes late. So I went to 2 or 3 different machines and I just did some really slow, intense training until I was at failure. I did 1 or 2 sets each. That was 2 days ago and I'm still very sore from doing that. And I kind of break it up that way. So, if every week I get a deadlift, I get a squat or a leg press, I get a chest press, a row, a pull down, a shoulder press, somewhere in that week, I don't get too worked up about, am I doing that, in one workout, or am I breaking it up and getting one every single day? Or am I getting, 3 of those twice a week? However that works out, that's kind of what I do for my own like fitness. And then the other stuff is just fun. Riding my bike, I don't care, really what heart rate zone I'm in and how much fat I'm burning. I just like it because it's fun. So that's the way I kind of think about those.
Yeah, and going back to the Fred Hahn stuff, I think what if I remember correctly, what he was saying in terms of like the slow motion methodology that he uses, it's basically it's roughly 10 seconds up. Like let's say we're talking about a bicep curl, right? So it's roughly 10 seconds up, roughly 10 seconds down, and then you do that for around like 4 to 6 reps or till muscular failure, or like he said, muscular success as he calls it. But it does make a lot of sense to me, like in terms of that type of resistance training. Like you can get very, very strong and you don't necessarily need to use a lot of weight. Like your body doesn't care if you've got like your body does not care if you've got 225 on the bench or 305 or 135. It responds to the resistance, right? That's how it makes the adaptation. But I do really, really like his methodology around like controlling the eccentric portion, right? Moving slowly, and it keeps the muscle so tense that when I'm doing it, I'm like, I can tell that this is very, very effective. But on that point, I think what you and I are saying here is it's also nice to do other things. Like I have days in which I swing kettlebells, do cardio. I like to get my heart rate up, and including those other elements with slow moving resistance training, in my opinion, will just make you a lot more of like an effective human being and well-rounded human being, so you can do other things. Like I don't think it's just slow moving training. I think like you should do other elements of exercise to just make you a more well-rounded human being, and that's just going to help you with just functional life as you age.
Yeah, dude, I love that, and I couldn't agree more. And the way I'll explain this to people is why is it that humans have Olympics and zebras don't have the Olympics? How come sharks don't have the Olympics? Well, sharks do like 2 or 3 really good like shark things, and zebras do 2 or 3 like really good zebra things. And like humans are generalists. Like you said, we do a lot of different things, and you could go to Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics, and there's all kinds of different body types and shapes, and some are explosive and some are endurance and everything in between. And that's how we are as humans, and we are generalists. And so I couldn't have said it better myself. Like the principles of the slow strength training method, I think are true. I've seen it work on repeat. I think that's good to incorporate. I wish I hadn't have been so locked into just doing that for as long as I have, that I could remember that there's other value in other things as well. And yeah, like I like that you at least asked him the question of like a slow concentric, a slow eccentric move where you're, releasing the weight. And kettlebell swing is a great example. I think it's one of my favorite exercises to do. And there's no way you could do a slow eccentric phase on a kettlebell swing, like lowering it really slow.
Yeah.
That's not the point of a kettlebell
It's
swing.
for speed and power. It's like literally the opposite. It's like
Exactly.
it's like training the flip side of the coin. It's like, why wouldn't you want to incorporate that,
Exactly. Yep. And what he says about preventing injury, I
Totally.
trust me, like I'm all in favor of. I have never once seen anybody who is well coached at a kettlebell swing get injured. Like, yeah, maybe if somebody wasn't well coached and they just picked up a kettlebell, like maybe you could get injured. But
Totally.
it's never happened in one of my sessions, and I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of them in sessions. And so, yeah, again, the principles I really truly believe in, and just like dietary stuff, like I said, I wish I hadn't been so myopic in that. And I'm starting to kind of open things up and do other things, not just slow strength. I think that's a great foundation. but I do think there's benefit to doing other things as well.
Yeah, and just to give Fred some credit here too, because like I'm pretty sure a lot of his clients, I would say, are maybe middle-aged and a little bit older. I think that's typically his, like, demographic. I could be wrong on that. Like, I'm sure he's trained some, like, younger athletes. I know he trained, his daughter that played some competitive sports, if I think I got that right, and she used the slow burn method, and I think she played soccer or something like that. Yeah, like, the one great thing I got out of my conversation with him is I ended up getting my mom into slow moving training. She's 75, but, like, on that side, it's like, nah, she probably doesn't need to be doing hang cleans, and she doesn't need to be swinging kettlebells. She has basically, like, 0 exercise experience, And so at 75, like, that is literally the perfect type of training for someone her age to do, you
Yeah.
know? And that kind of leads me into maybe my next question here with respect to like how you train if you've got clients that are slightly older, or let's just say people over 40, like how do you modify things in terms of training your clients around exercise, certain movements for people that are maybe getting a little bit older? How do you go about that with your clients?
Yeah, great question. And on the note of your mom, which is awesome, by the way, that makes me so
Yeah,
happy.
he gave
That's
me the name of
amazing.
a gym, in her, like, area, and I told her about it, and now she's going there 2 days a week and doing slow
Uh,
moving training, which is very cool. So, Fred, if you're listening, I appreciate you, brother.
That just so lights me up. That's amazing. We just interviewed Dr. Maria Fiatarone Singh, who's in Australia, and she works with geriatric patients. And she grew up watching like Jack LaLanne with her grandma who would lift weights. And like back in the 80s and 90s, like she's been doing this for a really long time. And they get 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds on strength training protocols, regardless of whether they've had experience or not. And they're getting incredible results. Like in I want to say this was like her very first study back in like the late 70s or early 80s. They were trying to tell people like it would be really good to walk. Like walking's a really good activity. And what they observed is that it wasn't a lack of desire to walk, it was the lack of ability to walk. These
Mm,
people would have loved to walk, but they couldn't. And they found that if they said nothing about walking, but you got them on a strength training protocol, they ended up walking spontaneously 35% more than they were before. So it's such a cool thing to consider that strength training made them so much more functional to do other things, regardless of whether they were told to go walk or not. So all that to say, I think what your mom's doing is super cool. So the it's like saying a carnivore diet, a hyper carnivore has 75% of their calories coming from animal foods. And then other people will like individualize it however they want. That's pretty similar to how I do the strength training. Like I do agree that there's certain principles that I could apply to a 9-year-old and I could apply to a 94-year-old, and those same principles would work for a professional hockey player and they would work for the 15-year-old, basketball player that I train to try to make her high school team. I I do really think that the principles can be the same, and then you have that individuality where you can start to mix things up. Um, and so, for example, like with my 15-year-old basketball player, we're swinging kettlebells. We're doing wood chops and swings and
that makes
stuff
sense.
that you're right.
Yeah.
I would not have your mom do that, at least in the beginning. Maybe she can handle that later on, but we don't need to be moving like that. We need to be creating muscle and making strong bones, and that's
Totally.
the priority. Where you mix things in, it can really even go down to what does the client like to do. Like I want to live within that as well. Like if I'm doing something that I think is amazing, but my client only really wants big biceps and that's all they care about, well, eventually, like they're going to fire me and hire another trainer where I could have helped them achieve what they wanted. And then maybe they would have been more open to doing other things later on. I would have kept that rapport with that person. Or, I've got one person I train probably 5 days a week because he loves it. We do the same routine in the gym every single time because he loves it. And that's what we do. And he really enjoys it and he keeps coming back. I've got another client that I've trained for 17 years of my 18 years now, and if I do the same workout twice, he would fire me. He loves variety.
Mm,
So part of that is understanding like if these people don't enjoy what you're doing, they're not going to do it and they're not going to get any benefit out of just sitting on the couch. Now I can take the principles that I know will work and fit it into those things to try to get good results. So it's kind of like a win-win for both of us. But yeah, there'll be some individualization there, but frankly, I want to have if we're talking about like a total body workout, or I'm mixing it up and periodizing for a week, I want to get what I call the big six workout exercises in with every exercise. So a horizontal push in the upper body, a horizontal pull in the upper body, a vertical push overhead, a vertical pull downward, a squat as a push, and a deadlift as a pull from the ground. I want to get those in pretty much consistently as much as I can. Everything else to me is just gravy or preference or whatever else somebody enjoys or keeps somebody engaged. That's kind of the way that I think about that as far as the straight training and periodization goes.
Yeah, and that obviously, I'm going to agree with you on that one. It's like, yeah, like every human being needs to be able to squat. Like that's just basically being able to sit down on the couch, stand up, sit on a chair. You need to be able to pick something up off the ground, like a basic deadlift, pressing overhead, compound movements. Like that makes a lot of sense. And then you kind of like mix and match different exercises from there. But like those are the foundational things, 100%. I mean, and one thing I was actually that popped into my mind here. I thought I would tell you this because you're a fellow podcaster. Going back to working clientels that are a little bit older. So I actually had Virginia McCall on the podcast. So you might want to reach out to this one because she was freaking amazing. She was on American Ninja Warrior. Her daughter's been on American Ninja Warrior for like 13, 14, 15 seasons. She's
Wow.
the she's 73 or 74 years old. She's the oldest American Ninja Warrior competitor, I believe, and she's the oldest person to complete like an obstacle on the American Ninja Warrior obstacle course. But she's in her mid 70s almost, and she can do 17 pull-ups. But which is wild, and she's ripped for her age. She's in shape. She takes good care of herself. But what's interesting, going back to just what we're talking about here and why I'm weaving this in, is like, going back to my mom, slow moving, strength training, that's a great place to start. Virginia is someone that has been active her entire life. She's, been a dancer. She was on Broadway. She swims, like does all these things. And then she progressively kind of moved up and got stronger and stronger and stronger. And she works out every single day and eats, relatively clean for how active she is. But here's the point. You can you can build muscle later on in life, 100%, right? I think a lot of people, especially going back to what you were saying, like people just don't have the ability to walk. I think there's something there too. Like if you don't use it, you lose it. So you have to maintain a certain consistency over the course of your life of just basic movement so you keep the ability to move as you age. But I think a lot of people think like when they get to a certain age, because they are a certain age or whatever the case is, they can't build muscle or they can't get stronger. And she was rattling off all these different studies of like people using resistance bands in their like 70s and 80s and building muscle and putting on lean mass and getting stronger bones and all those types of things. So just for the listeners and everyone else out there, it's like get your parents to work out, and if you're older, you can start working out too. Like you're going to see the benefits. Like you can get stronger at any age. That is 100% a fact. So I just wanted to drop that in there since we were talking about it. But going back to because obviously now, like I've realized you've been doing this for a long time. Like what's like a doing this for as long as you've been doing this, training clients, consulting on diet, exercise, like what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self, like when you were starting out?
Oh man, great. I wish I would have been carnivore sooner. I'll tell you that, or at least low carb. Stop eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I, I guess oftentimes I'll look at kind of where I am in life and I'll be frustrated that I'm not like further along, or I never went back to college to get my degree, or things like that. And just recognizing that this is a process and you can't really speed up your learning and experience with this kind of thing. It's a process all of us need to go through. And like I said, you can't really speed it up all that much. You need to take those steps to get there. So I would have, had a little bit more patience, had a little bit more kindness toward myself, and understanding that you have a long way to go, but you've also come a long way when you look back. And just, yeah, I would have been a little bit more patient with myself as far as that goes. And at the end of the day, we talk about all these things that we nerd out about, right? Like I love talking about that. You and I could talk to Fred Hahn for 8 hours, like
Yeah.
about any type of protocol. We can talk about nutrition and micronutrients and macronutrients and all this stuff. And dude, like an anvil could fall out of a plane and smash me to bits right now. Like we have to remember that all of this stuff is to enhance our life. It's to make our lives better, to increase our longevity, and it's also that we are on this planet for a very, very short amount of time. Like, what's the point of all of it? It's to make your life better. It's to be kinder to people and to express love and try to take steps in that direction. Be a little bit more present. So yeah, I would have kind of gone in that direction a little bit more with my younger self. And it's still something I struggle with today. But as much as we love the science and getting into the nitty gritty about all this stuff, we also, we should be kind and show love and be patient and all that stuff because we are here for a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And maybe while we're on this topic, because again, like I said, you've been doing this for a long time. I'm clearly starting to understand that. I believe you're doing what, 3 podcasts a week, right?
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when you typically do them, and you're also consulting with clients. Like you got a lot going on. I was just curious, like just doing this for as long as you've been doing it, like are there any like boundaries that you set for yourself or limitations that you set for yourself to make sure like you don't get into like that burnout mode as like a coach and content creator and podcaster and all that stuff?
Yeah, I love that question. One that kind of sounds a little bit silly is so I work mostly with my clients during the day
Okay.
until it hits a certain time, and then I have in the last year or so given myself permission to take like an hour in the middle of the day to just like nonsense. I'll do my like Duolingo lesson, and then I give myself time and permission to like doom scroll Instagram and watch all the hockey videos I want to watch and just have an hour of like nonsense. I go back to work after that, and that's when I do all the back end stuff, all the editing for the podcast, all the accounting we have to do, all the emails I've got to respond to, all my programming updates from that day, updates I need to make to the next day, make sure that's all on track. But I've also found that like there just has to be a time when the laptop has to close.
Yeah.
It's a certain time when it's like today was today. Did I get it all in? I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Is my inbox at zero? I hope so. If it's not, like that now it's wind down time. Now I'm gonna eat a really good meal. I'm gonna go sit in my sauna. I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna focus on sleep, and I'm gonna start this over the next day. And that's allowed me to do this. I believe it's allowed me to do this for as long as I do. And you know what it's like to run a business. It's nonstop. Like I literally see clients 7 days a week. I work 7 days a week. This lifestyle allows me to show up with my clients the way that I want. Like I think back to when we started our business in July of 2020. Literally, I have not missed one single session. I've been late for maybe 5 sessions, and I've not missed one session that I've committed to for any reason. I getting sick, not getting sick. I have great energy. I feel really good. I feel healthy for my age at 41. So I'm grateful to have found this stuff that allows me to do that. But yes, you can burn out really, really easily on this unless you're setting fences, boundaries, and giving yourself some time to, whether it's do your meditation practice or journaling, or whether it's doing stupid, mindless stuff like I do and doom scroll Twitter and get pissed off about political stuff. I don't know, like whatever. Like giving yourself that time allows you to keep your batteries recharged and enjoy life.
Yeah, and that's what's going back to maybe some of the diet piece. That's what's so cool about, I think, a lot of these low carb diet variations, right? Like you mentioned, being able to have the capacity and the energy to do a lot of this stuff. Honestly, I think that's what a lot of these diets do. And I think there's like two main things. And I was talking to Ben Giles about this. He was a couple podcasts ago. But the best part about like carnivore or keto or whatever is your ability to kind of go through your day to day, but not constantly needing to eat. Like, the old like bodybuilder type of like, oh, I got to eat my 6 small meals a day and all those types of things. Like, no, man, you could have like a big breakfast or a big lunch or a dinner. You could go through your day doing what you need to do, have the all the energy that you need, and not feel like this constant desire or need or want to like have food. That's like one of the best uh parts about these low carb diet variations because the protein's high, the fat is high, you're satiated, you've got energy. I don't know if that's something that you've ever thought about, but like also too, like you don't need to take time out of your day to like go to lunch or eat lunch. Like you save a ton of money, but you also save a ton of time, just not have to constantly think about food, what you're going to have for lunch, and your life doesn't revolve around food and when you're going to eat, and you have the capacity and the energy to just do more. Like, do you ever think about that?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. I think about like, especially like going on a vacation. Like when I hear the stories of some of my clients when they go on vacation, it's like we had to get breakfast for the kids and we had to pack all these snacks. And then, lunch was on the other side of the park. So we missed out on these rides. And I'm just thinking like, well, you just go all day. You don't need to eat all day. Like you could do that later. Or you could choose to go to breakfast and it's like this enjoyable thing where you appreciate company or oh, I really like this food. This is a nice treat. I don't often get this. It's like it's such a paradigm shift that like you're explaining. Like when you change your food and you're not tied to food all the time, it's amazing. It's like it's just an afterthought. And yeah, I'll give this example that one person gave on my podcast. His name's Aranda. He's in the UK, and he said before, like before he found low carb, hunger was a bully. Whatever he was doing, working, spending time with his kids, the bully would come in, would shove him down, would punch him in the arm, would take his lunch money, and say like, "You have to focus on me right now." After he found low carb, the hunger transformed from a bully over to like a really nice friend, a
Mm.
really gentle friend that would like, hey, hey Max, what's up? How you doing? It's lunchtime. Like, are you? It looks like you're busy. Yeah, I can come back. I'll just come back. I'll come back. I'll see you at dinner time, whatever. And it's just a totally different experience of like the hunger that makes you hangry and makes you be crappy to your kids or your spouse or whatever to your coworkers versus like the peace and calm of your energy is within you. It's from your own stored fat that you've tied yourself into, and it's not with the food that you eat as much as it is what food and fuel you're carrying with you. It's a totally different game changer. So I love that you bring that up.
Well, and that also goes to kind of tie that back to what you were saying a little bit earlier when you ran into like an issue when you were a trainer, like what you were talking about earlier, something that would have like stressed you out or caused you anxiety. It literally removes a lot of those elements so you just are thinking clear. Like, yes, of course, like you're happier, you have a elevated mood, all those types of things. You're not hangry, but it's like, yes, you can be a kinder, nicer human being, literally by changing like how you eat. But it's also going back to what, you were running into. It's like you become a lot more conscious of what you're doing. You think clear. Like it's wild to me how changing your diet can change not just how you look, but all of those other elements in regards to like your life, how you perceive the world, how you interact with other human beings. That is wild to me. That's still so wild to me.
That's so well said. I've got nothing to add to that that would make that any better than the way you said it. That was so well said. I love it.
And I know what's wild is we're also coming up here on time a little bit. I had one quick question before we kind of start wrapping up here, Casey. In your opinion, just in regards to like obviously all these different diets that we've been talking about, low carb, keto, carnivore. We didn't even really get into like fasting, intermittent fasting, but I think those are all play a part into this. Like where do you think things are going in the future in terms of like metabolic health? These diet variations, like where do you see carnivore or any of these diets evolving into in the future? I was curious.
Ooh, that's a great question. The way I'm looking at it now is I'm seeing like a delta, and it's getting wider and wider. I see the people that find this way of eating and they learned it through ways you and I are putting out content. It's not mainstream, but they listen to a podcast, they get interested, and they vastly improve their health. And I'll contrast this with kind of the example we're talking about. I really don't want to shame this person, but like I went to a pro hockey game last week, and the woman sitting next to me can barely fit in her chair, and she's eating like hours of a hot dog, and then a drink, and then the nuts, and then the it's the next thing, and the Dippin' Dots, and it's just like she's been hungry and eating literally for 2 hours, and I'm just thinking like, man, I haven't eaten all day, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be this delta of the people that find this way of eating, this way of living, and embrace it, and see the benefit, and continue on and raise their kids in that way, and they're going to be a whole nother generation versus the people that either aren't going to get this information or being bamboozled by the medical or the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, and it's not going to go great for them, and they're going to pass that on to their kids, unfortunately. So I don't know. I think a gap is going to get wider and wider, and hopefully more and more people see the other people that have found this and embrace this and like are living and aging healthily and are thriving. So that's kind of the way I could see it going.
Well said. Anything new coming up for you? Anything coming down the pipeline, projects, events, any of that stuff?
For us, we're just kind of status quo here. Quite happy just running our business and seeing our people. Nothing new on the way. Just keep the podcast going. It's been a joy to talk with amazing people like yourself and hear people's stories and share that with my clients. And yeah, it's just been a fun journey. So I wouldn't say anything new, but just life is really good right now, and just continuing to push forward with it sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, that's awesome and great to hear. And in regards to the podcast, like where can people find you online, Casey, get in touch with you, all that good stuff, find the podcast, all that.
Yeah, the best thing is just to go to our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. Central location where they can find everything. We've got lots of free resources, a blog I used to do, the seminar series that has meal plans and lesson plans. You'll find the podcast there, all of our social media. But the main thing, like the first thing you see on the website, is a book now button. So anybody can click that and select a time that they can meet with us for a complimentary 30-minute session to discuss whatever people want. Advice, chatting back and forth, helping them with either their fitness or their nutrition or whatever. So that we offer that for free anytime. All the resources on our website are free. So again, that's myboundlessbody.com.
Perfect. And for the listeners, I'll put everything in the show notes. So all the links to all that stuff will be available. So again, Casey, man, it was great to have you on my podcast and chat with you about all this fun stuff. This was awesome. And thanks guys for listening to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.